Give me one moment here. Just want to make sure that the live stream is working. So I got an error message here. Okay, no, we are good. A'udhu billahi min shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. In the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Verily, all praise is due to Allah. We praise Him, we seek His aid, and we ask for His forgiveness. We seek refuge in Allah from the evils of our own selves and from the evils of our own actions. And whomsoever Allah guides, none can misguide. And whomsoever Allah leaves astray, none can guide back to the correct path. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We testify there is no deity worthy of our worship except for Allah, who is alone, no partner, there never has and never will be another. And we bear witness that Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is the last and the final prophet of Allah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, my brothers and sisters, friends and family members, everyone tuning into the live stream, and everyone joining us for the Zoom meeting. Just as a reminder for those who are joining in for the live stream, please feel free to join us for the after reading or after halaqah discussion. But jazakallah khairan everyone for tuning in for this Monday's discussion. Again, continuing on the ethics of disagreement in Islam. We are now currently on chapter number 8, which we will be continuing for the chapter of knowledge and refinement. And inshallah, this one is a little bit of a longer chapter. We may take a hiatus for in the middle of this and continue it next week. But inshallah, if we make some good progress, inshallah, maybe we'll be able to reach the end of the chapter for this week. But inshallah, let's jump right into it. Bismillah. So the training and the manners of the Imam. So like the companions of the first generation and their immediate successors, the Tabi'un, the leading scholars of the second and the third centuries had many differences on issues which required ijtihad. Again, ijtihad being physical or mental effort in independent reasoning by an expert in Islamic law. And since their differences were not motivated by any form of egoism or desire to create discord, which is the common theme, one can venture to say that they were all on the right path. It is perhaps no exaggeration to say also that these scholars were singularly dedicated to the pursuit of truth and to attaining the pleasure of Allah. And they were highly trained and they were qualified, and this is why their verdicts were accommodated by scholars of all ages, even till today. And it was a common practice among them to endorse the judgments of those who passed sound verdicts, irrespective of the schools of law they belonged to, and to ask Allah's forgiveness for those who seemed to have erred. They had a high mutual regard for one another. And when faced with a difficult issue, some jurists would consult the literature of another school without hesitation or embarrassment, even though they may not agree on the type of evidence that was then used. And they, of course, felt free to consult any substantiated text. And having arrived then at their verdicts, they would issue them with such concluding phrases as, "This is more cautious," or "This is preferable," or "This is how it should be," or "I dislike this," or even "This does not appeal to me." And they did not feel impeded by any unwarranted restrictions or any fear of unfounded accusations, for they were easygoing and open-minded people, and their concern was to facilitate matters for the people. But among the companions of the Prophet, their successors and the leading scholars after them, there were several differences relating, for an example, to the preparation for and the performance of Salah. And some recited the Basmalah at the beginning of Surah Al-Fatiha, and others did not, for an example. Some uttered it aloud and others did not. Some recited the Qunut supplication as part of the Salat al-Fajr, the dawn prayer, while others did not. And some renewed their wudu, their ablution, after nose bleeding, vomiting, and cupping, while others did not. And some considered that any physical contact with women nullified wudu, while others did not. And some renewed their wudu after eating camel meat or food cooked on a direct fire, while others saw no need for that. And these differences never prevented them from performing the salah behind each other. Abu Hanifa anhu, and his followers, as well as the Al-Shafi and other leading scholars, performed salah behind the Imam of Medina from the Maliki school and others as well. Although these Imam did not recite the Basmalah, whether silently or audibly, it was reported that Abu Yusuf, a leading scholar of the Hanafi school, perform salah behind al-Rashid, and Abu Yusuf found later that al-Rashid had been cupped. He did not repeat the salah, although he was of the opinion that cupping nullifies ablution. And Ahmed ibn Hanbal believed that nose bleeding and cupping nullified ablution. And he was asked if people could perform salah behind an imam who did not redo his ablution after bleeding, and he replied saying, "How could I not pray behind Malik and Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib?" And according to Shafi, the Qunut supplication is a firm practice of the Prophet ﷺ. Yet he is reported to have performed Salatul Fajr near the grave of Abu Hanifa, but did not make the Qunut supplication. And when asked about this, al-Shafi replied, "How can I deviate from him while I am in his presence?" And he is also reported to have said, "Perhaps we have inclined to the school of thought, the madhab of the people of Iraq." And Malik from the Maliki school was the most knowledgeable scholar of hadith transmitted by the people of Medina and the most accurate in dealing with the chains of transmitters, known as the Isnad, the chain of narrations. And he was also the one most acquainted with the practices of Omar ibn al-Khattab and the sayings of Abd Allah ibn Omar, Aisha, and the 7 prominent jurists among the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. And he was one of the pioneers in establishing the science of hadith reporting and making juristic verdicts. And the hadith which he collected and the verdicts he made are contained in his book Al-Muwatta, in which he compiled the reliable hadith known to the people of the Hijaz, the sayings of the companions, and the verdicts of the second generations of Muslims, the Tabi'un, which he verified. And the chapters of the book are classified in accordance with the branches of jurisprudence with considerable scholarship. And Al-Muwatta is the fruit of 40 years of scholarly effort. It was the first book on hadith and jurisprudence which appeared in the history of Islam, and its contents were validated by 70 contemporary scholars from the Hijaz. Nonetheless, when the Khalifa al-Mansur wanted to have several copies made and distributed to the new Muslim regions with the intention of getting people to follow its line and thus put an end to differences and dissension, Malik was the first to reject this suggestion. Why? Because he is reported to have said to Mansur, "Don't do this. People in various parts of the Muslim lands already possess a body of knowledge based on reports that they have received and sayings of the Prophet ﷺ they have heard prior to this. Each group of people acts according to what came to it first. So there are variations in people's practices, and leave the people of each region to follow what they themselves choose." So the Khalifa then acquiesced in Malik's wish and prayed that Allah should grant him success. And Malik's advice to the Khalifa and his refusal to have Al-Muwatta, a book which he had worked so scrupulously and for so long on, officially prescribed as the standard text of hadith and jurisprudence, leave us in no doubt about the breadth of understanding and open-mindedness, as well as his complete lack of egoism. So he was able to see the limits and the dangers of this authoritarian rule based upon his own findings and rulings. Alhamdulillah, a beautiful, wonderful example. Next is Al-Layth's letter to Malik. So perhaps one of the best practical examples of the ethics and the norms of disagreement was the letter sent to Malik by Al-Layth ibn Sa'd, the leading scholar and jurist in Egypt at the time. So the letter in which Al-Layth gives his views on the various issues in which he differed with Malik was a hallmark of knowledge and gracefulness. The letter is too long to quote in full, but here are a few excerpts to illustrate its contents and its tone. Bismillah. From your letter from which I have received, I am pleased to know that you are in good health. May Allah make your health last and enable you to show gratitude to him. May he shower more of his abundant goodness on you. You have been informed that I make juristic rulings for people which are at variance with the practice of the people of Medina. You pointed out that I should fear for my own soul about the verdicts I make for the people here, and also that they should follow the practice of the people of Medina, to which the Prophet ﷺ migrated and in which the Quran was revealed. What you have written in this respect, inshallah, is right, and I trust that my response to your comments will please you. Among those who are blessed with knowledge, there is no one who dislikes odd or contrary verdicts more than I, and who has a greater preference for the past scholars of Medina, or who adopts more readily the verdicts on which they are unanimous. Praise and gratitude are due to Allah, the Lord and the sustainer of the worlds. No associate has he. So Al-Layth ibn Sa'd goes on to state the differences of opinion between him and Malik over the authority of the practice of the people of Medina. And he points out that many of the early companions of the Prophet ﷺ, who were brought up under his guidance and instruction, had disseminated the teachings of the Quran and the Sunnah through various lands as far of which they could. And he also pointed out that the followers of the second generation had their differences of opinion about many issues. And by the way of example, he mentions Rabi'a ibn Abi Abd al-Rahman, but states his disagreement with him on certain matters. And then he says, to quote, Bismillah, in spite of this, praise be to Allah, Rabi'a was a person who possessed abundant goodness. He had an original mind and an eloquent tongue. He was a man of obvious grace and good manners, and had a genuine love for his fellow Muslims in general and for us in particular. May Allah grant him his mercy and forgiveness and the best recompense for his deeds. And next, Ibn Sa'd mentions some of the issues over which he and Malik were at variance. For example, combining Salatul al-Maghrib and al-Isha on a rainy night, or passing judgment on the evidence of a single witness, or paying the delayed portion of a dowry only in the event of a divorce. Next, performing the prayer for rain, Salatul al-Istisqa, before delivering the khutbah, the sermon. And Ibn Sa'd concluded his letter by saying this quote, Bismillah. I've admitted many issues apart from these. I pray that Allah grants you success and long life because of what I hope people will benefit thereby, and because of what I fear they will lose with the passing away of one such as you. Let me assure you of my feeling of nearness to you in spite of the distance that separates us. This is the position of esteem in which I hold you to. Do not stop writing to me with news of yourself, your children, and family, and if there is anything you want me to do for you personally or for anyone for whom you have a special concern, I would be most pleased to do any service in this regard. At the time of writing this letter, we are in good health, praise be to Allah. We ask Allah to enable us to thank him for what he has favored us with and to continue to bestow his favors on us. May the peace and mercy of Allah be upon you. And there are many discussions and debates recorded in biographical works and historical writings which display this great erudition and precision and and which are filled with glowing examples of proper ethics and norms of disagreement. And the spirit of enlightened discourse suffered only with the emergence and the spread of rigid intimidation or taqleed, which we'll probably get into later on in the book. And this meant that people followed the rulings and practices of a particular school of thought to the exclusion of all others, and even regarded others as deficient or misguided because of the differences of opinions. And this result was a hardening of attitudes and positions among scholars and a certain rigidity towards knowledge itself. And this was especially true after the passing away of the reputable scholar of whom Al-Ghazali had said, quoted saying, some of the remaining scholars of the second generation continue to uphold the exemplary pattern set up by their predecessors. They adhered steadfastly to the purity of Islam and the established practice of the early righteous scholars. And they shunned close contact with those in political authority and refused to be compromised. And the Khulafa, out of necessity, insisted on appointing them as judges and governors, but when they failed to enlist their approval, there were worldly, self-seeking opportunists ready to take the place of the pious and the righteous. And in this respect, Al-Ghazali mentions and states, quoting, "People of this ilk saw the dignified and honored status of the scholars and the fact that despite the reluctance and refusal, they were offered positions as a'imma and governors. These self-seeking people proceeded to acquire knowledge to fulfill their desire for scholarly repute and positions of honor. And they engaged in the study of jurisprudence. They presented themselves to governors and sought their friendship and patronage. Some of them were successful, but none could claim to be free from the degradation and humiliation of pleading for material favors and official ranks. Jurors who were once sought by persons in authority thus became the seekers of patronage and status. And they had maintained their integrity and honor through their refusal to bow to persons of authority. Now they were compromised and humiliated by ingratiating themselves with rulers. This is apart from those scholars of Allah's religion whom the Almighty has blessed with success in every age." And Al-Ghazali has thus depicted the actual situation of scholars who had become infatuated with the quest for the material world and for whom religion was the only way to reach the gates of princely patronage. And this desire to attain the love of rulers, knowledge then became devalued. And Malik used to say, "Do not acquire this knowledge of religion from 4 types of people. First, the foolish and the incompetent. Second, the self-seeking opportunists who seek to propagate their own innovations. 3, the liars who falsify people's reports, even if they do not do so using the saying of the Prophet ﷺ. And fourthly, and those who are known for their goodness, righteousness, and regular performance of worship, but who are ignorant of the basis of what they practice and speak about." And he also said that this knowledge is religion itself. Be careful from whom you acquire your religion. I know of 70 people who, while pointing to the Prophet's mosque, they would say, "The Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said while at these very columns," yada, 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 or so on and so forth. But I have never believed anything that they had said. They were people who proved to be honest if they were to be entrusted with the public treasury, but when it comes to academic honesty, they would fail to live up to that expectation. Thus, we avoided consulting these people until Ibn Shahab came to us and started to crowd at his door seeking reliable knowledge. And it was unlikely that great disagreements would have occurred amongst these people who had these merits and characteristics as those as Ibn Shihab. And even if difference did occur, they only resulted from the individual pursuit of the truth for the truth's sake and not from the egotistical ends. And in order to appreciate the standard of ethic and the norms of behavior, which the early righteous scholars practice in dealing with differences, let us look at a few examples of exemplary conduct which they had set. So here's a few examples that are listed inside of the book. First being Abu Hanifa and Malik. So we have already alluded to the major differences between the leading scholars, Abu Hanifa and Malik, and their basic variations in approach when tackling new sorts of issues. And there was also a marked difference in age between the two men, but all this did not tarnish their mutual respect and fellowship. Imagine that today. The fellow Qadi Iyad, in his book Al-Madrik, recorded that Al-Layth ibn Sa'd met Malik in Medina as he was coming out of a meeting with Abu Hanifa. Mentioning, "I see that your forehead is bathed in perspiration," said Al-Layth. "I sweated in my meeting with Abu Hanifa. He is really a jurist, a faqih, O Egyptian," said Malik. And later Al-Layth met Abu Hanifa and said to him, how excellent are the remarks of this man, Malik, concerning you. And his retort was, I have not met anyone more quick-witted and truly perceptive than he, acknowledged Abu Hanifa in return. So even people who wind up disagreeing, they're complimenting each other. The next example is Muhammad ibn al-Hasan and Malik. So Muhammad ibn al-Hasan was a very close and prominent colleague of Abu Hanifa and was one of the one who kept records of his judgment. He left his home and went to live for 3 years with Imam Malik, during which he studied al-Muwatta directly from him. And one day, the two distinguished scholars, Muhammad ibn al-Hasan and al-Shafi'i, were conferring, and Muhammad ibn al-Hasan ventured to say this: our colleague, meaning Abu Hanifa, is more knowledgeable than yours, meaning Malik. Moreover, he added, as if to provoke al-Shafi'i, it is not befitting that Abu Hanifa should remain silent while Malik speaks. And Imam al-Shafi'i replied, tell me in all honesty, who is more knowledgeable about the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, Malik or Abu Hanifa? And Malik replied, Muhammad ibn al-Hasan, and went on to add, but our colleague Abu Hanifa is more informed and skilled in analogy. Al-Shafi'i conceded that this was so and went on. Malik is more knowledgeable in the book of Allah than Abu Hanifa, so whoever is more knowledgeable in the book of Allah and in the Sunnah of his Messenger ﷺ has priority to speak. And Muhammad ibn al-Hasan could not say anything more. The next example is al-Shafi'i and Muhammad ibn al-Hasan. So al-Shafi'i said, one day I was having a discussion with Muhammad ibn al-Hasan. There was so much talk and disagreement between us that I noticed Ibn al-Hasan's jugular vein swelling up due to rage and fury. But nonetheless, Muhammad ibn al-Hasan said, if there is any person who disagrees with us and yet is able to convince us of its position, it is al-Shafi'i. And when he asked why this was so, he replied, because of the clarity of his mind and exposition and his certainty in knowledge, which shows itself quite clearly in the process of questioning, answering, and listening. And there are some examples of the ethics and norms of proper behavior in disagreement as demonstrated by the leading scholars. From these examples, we can see that the successors of the second generation followed the exemplary pattern set by their righteous forebears. They all drank deeply from the source of prophetic guidance and example. The good conduct of their righteousness forebears was not only confined to avoiding defamation and slander, for their overriding concern was for precision and certitude in all of their intellectual pursuits. They therefore also steered away from matters about which they had no knowledge and were extremely careful in making juristic rulings lest they should err. And such features of their conduct are evident in a statement made by Abd al-Rahman ibn Abi al-Layla, who said, in the mosque, the Prophet's mosque in Medina, I knew 120 of the companions of the Prophet. There is not among them who, if asked about a saying of the Prophet, or to give a ruling on an issue, would not wish that some companion would reply instead. And in another version, he reported to have said, people who prevent an issue to one of the companions. This companion would refrain from passing judgment and would refer the questioner to another companion. The process would go on, and the issue would be referred back to the companion who had been consulted first. So Muslim scholars in the early times had raised themselves above emotional impulses when issues of knowledge were concerned, and were willing to admit any deficiency on their part and defer to others. And they would be very circumspect when faced with the critical issue, lest they give an erroneous or potentially harmful judgment call. And a case in the point is that of a man who was sent to the people to ask Malik about a particular issue. It took the man 6 months to reach Malik. And when the issue was put to Malik, he said to the man, tell those who sent you, I have no knowledge of this matter. He then replied, saying, who then knows about it? Asked the man. The one whom Allah has endowed with knowledge, says Malik, and quoted the verse of the Quran in which the angels, when asked by Allah to tell Adam about the nature of things, said in Surah 2, Ayah 32, "Glory be to you. Of knowledge we have none except what you have taught us." And is related on another occasion that Malik was asked about 48 issues. To 32 of these, his reply was, "I do not know." So we're talking about one of the most prominent scholars, one of the ones that we have in reference for the madhabs we have today, is easily able to state, "I do not know the answer to this question," as opposed to trying to discern for himself and come up with an incorrect answer. And Khalid ibn Hadash reported saying, "I came to Malik from Iraq to ask his opinion on 40 issues, and he answered 5 of these." And Ibn Ajlan used to say, if a learned man failed to understand the wisdom of the saying, "I don't know," his judgment would be erroneous. And Malik himself used to quote this saying, "A learned man should instill into his students the habit of saying, 'I don't know,' so that this habit should become a principle to which they should resort. In this vein, if someone is asked about something he does not know, he should say, 'I do not know.'" And Abu Darda, a companion of the Prophet ﷺ, is reliably reported to have as having said, "To say, 'I do not know,' is the half of knowledge." And we're reaching about 7:30 Eastern Standard Time here, but we only have a couple of pages left here. I think we should why don't we just finish this this chapter for today, inshallah. As stretched out here may go a little bit later than usual. Inshallah, bismillah. So Malik and Ibn Uyayna, Sufyan ibn Uyayna was a close associate of Imam Malik, and al-Shafi said that were it not for both of them, knowledge in the Hijaz would have disappeared. And Ibn Uyayna, however, was inclined to defer to Malik, and it was related that once he mentioned a hadith and was afterwards told that Malik differed with him on the hadith, saying, "Do you compare me with Malik?" resorted Ibn Uyayna. "My status compared to Malik is, as the poet Jabir says, like the strength of a suckling camel when compared to that of a grown-up one." And Ibn Uyayna related a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, "People might travel to the farthest corners of the earth in search of knowledge, but they will not find anyone more knowledgeable than the learned man of Medina." And when asked who was alluded to in this hadith, Ibn Sufyan said that it was Malik ibn Anas and added, stating, quoting, "He, Malik, never reported any unreliable hadith. He never accepted any hadith from anyone whose trustworthiness and reliability were not beyond question. I have a feeling that Medina will come to ruin after the death of Malik ibn Anas." Next example, a short one, Malik and al-Shafi. Al-Shafi has been mentioned in quoting saying, "Malik ibn Anas is my teacher. I derive knowledge from him. When people mention scholars, Malik stands out as a star. If there is no one that I trust more wholeheartedly than Malik ibn Anas." He also used to say, if a hadith is reported by Malik, its reliability should be readily accepted, because if he had any doubt about the hadith, he would disregard it completely. The next one mentioned here is Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Malik. So Abu Zorah al-Dimashqi said, "I heard someone asking Ahmad ibn Hanbal about his stand when faced with a hadith over whose transmission Sufyan and Malik disagreed. Ibn Hanbal replied saying, 'Malik is dearer to me.' He was then asked, what if al-Awza'i and Malik were in disagreement? And Ibn Hanbal replied saying, 'Malik is preferable in my opinion, although I regard al-Awza'i as one of the leading scholars.' And Ibn Hanbal was then asked about Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, about comparing him with Malik, since al-Nakha'i was not one of the experts on hadith, al-hadith. And Ibn Hanbal replied, al-Nakha'i has to be placed among his contemporaries. And he was asked about his advice about a man who wanted to learn by heart a hadith transmitted by a single individual. And he replied saying, let him learn the hadith reported by Malik. And next section is regarding opinions on Abu Hanifa. So Shu'ba ibn al-Hajjaz was a leading authority on hadith, while Abu Hanifa, as we have already seen, belonged to the school of reasoning, al-Ra'i. And despite the differences of their methodologies, Shu'ba had a high regard for Abu Hanifa. And there was a bond of genuine affection between them, and they corresponded with each other. And Shu'ba used to authenticate Abu Hanifa's work and request him to speak. And when the news of Abu Hanifa's death had reached him, he said, gone with him is the jurisprudence of Kufa. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestow his mercy on him and us. And when someone asked Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan about Abu Hanifa, he said, conscious of God, he only recommends and extols that knowledge with which Allah Almighty has endowed him. As for myself, by Allah, whenever I deem any of his pronouncements to be preferable, I adopt him. And this shows that divergence in views does not prevent these scholars from accepting what they perceive to be good from one another. And in addition, each would mention the virtues and merits of the other and acknowledge their ideas when they quoted them in support of their own arguments. There are many accounts to tell of the high esteem of which Abd Allah ibn al-Mubarak held Abu Hanifa. He always spoke of him in a favorable manner and attested to his integrity. And he often quoted him and praised him, and he would not allow anyone to disparage him in his own mosque. And one day, someone in his circle of students tried to sneer at Abu Hanifa, and Ibn al-Mubarak said to him, be quiet. By Allah, if you had met Abu Hanifa, you would have seen the strength of his intellect and his nobility. And al-Shafi is reported to have said that he heard Malik being asked about Uthman al-Bati, and Malik replied, he was a man of average ability. And when he was asked about Ibn Abi Shabarma, he then said he was a man of average ability. And then when he was asked about Abu Hanifa, he said, if he came to the brick walls of this mosque and argued with you, saying that they were made of wood, you would have really believed they were made of wood. This was a pointer to Abu Hanifa's skill in analogical deduction. Al-Shafi's most frequently quoted comment of Abu Hanifa was, regarding jurisprudence, people are like dependent children before Abu Hanifa. And in the study sessions and seminars conducted by, bear with me one moment here. In the study sessions and seminars conducted by these scholars, only the good and the beneficial were mentioned. And if anyone tried to disregard or contravene the conventions of proper ethics and behavior in which they were conducted, that person would be immediately corrected, and he would not be given any chance to slander or sneer at anyone. And Al-Fadl ibn Musa al-Sanani, Sanani was asked to comment on those who scornfully attacked Abu Hanifa. He said, quoting, Abu Hanifa confronted such people with knowledge they could grasp and also acknowledged that they were intellectually not able to grasp. He left them nothing that they could stand on, and they resented him for this. And there are some of the reports and comments which have been made by leading scholars of hadith who used to differ with most of Abu Hanifa's interpretations and conclusions. However, their differences with him did not prevent them from extolling his virtues and his merits, for they were confident about that these differences were not motivated by any sort of egoism or arrogance on his part, but by mutual pursuit of truth. And were it not for these high ethical standards and refined manners, a great deal of jurisprudence of our early and respective scholars would have fallen into oblivion or then been cast aside. So these scholars came to the defense of other scholars only because they knew that their responsibility was to safeguard Islamic jurisprudence, which is indispensable for the moral protection and well-being of the Muslim Ummah. The next is regarding opinions of on al-Shafi'i. So Ibn Uyayna was a distinguished scholar and one who was held in high esteem. Yet when people came to him for an explanation of some point in the Quran or judicial ruling, he would refer them to al-Shafi'i with the words, "Ask this person." Often on seeing al-Shafi'i, he would say, "This is the best young man of his time." And when he heard of the death of al-Shafi, he said, "If Muhammad ibn Idris had died, then the best man of his time has died." And Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan used to say, "If I prayed to Allah for al-Shafi even in my salah." And Abd Allah ibn Abd al-Hakam and his son Muhammad were followers of the Maliki school of thought, but the father advised the son to remain close to al-Shafi because he did not see anyone who had more insight into the principles of knowledge or jurisprudence. And it seems that Muhammad acted on his father's advice because he is reported to have said, "Had it not been for al-Shafi, I would not have known how to reply to anyone's argument. Through him, I have learned whatever I have. He is the one, may Allah bless him, who instructed me in analogical reasoning, and he was an upholder of the Sunnah and established practice. He was a good and virtuous person. He had an eloquent tongue and a firm, exacting intellect." Next was Ahmed and al-Shafi. Abd Allah, the son of Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal, once asked his father, "What sort of person was al-Shafi? I hear you frequently praying for him." Al-Shafi, may Allah bless him, said his father, was like the sun to the world and like good health to people. Can you think of any substitute or compensation for these two vital necessities? And Saleh, another son of Ahmed ibn Hanbal, was met by Yahya ibn Mu'amin, who asked him, "Isn't your father ashamed of what he is doing?" "What is he doing?" asked Saleh. He said, I saw him with al-Shafi, said Yahya. And al-Shafi was riding and he was on foot holding the rein of al-Shafi's mount. And Salih later relayed to his father, who said, "If you see him again, tell him that I say that if he wishes to gain true knowledge and understanding, let him come and take hold of the other side of the reins of al-Shafi's mount." And Abu Humayd Ibn Ahmed al-Basri reported that he was one day discussing a certain issue with Ahmed ibn Hanbal. The man from the audience told Ibn Hanbal that there was no authentic hadith on the issue. If there is no authentic hadith on the issue, there is al-Shafi's pronouncement on it, and the proofs that he used are the most reliable on this issue, replied Ibn Hanbal, thus demonstrating his confidence in al-Shafi's scholarship. He later asked al-Shafi on his ruling on certain matters, which the latter gave. Ahmed then asked him, "On what basis have you pronounced this ruling? Is there a hadith or a written document on it?" Al-Shafi replied that there was, and he produced a relevant, authentic hadith on the Prophet. Ahmed ibn Hanbal also reported to have said, "If I were asked a question in which I do not know a relevant saying, khabar, I would say al-Shafi says, because he is an imam and a scholar from the Quraysh." And Dawood ibn Ali al-Asbahani reported that he heard Ishaq ibn Rahawiya say, "Ahmad ibn Hanbal met me in Mecca and said to me, 'Come with me and let me introduce you to a man the like of whom you have never seen.' And he showed me al-Shafi." Such was the high esteem of which Ahmad ibn Hanbal held for al-Shafi. And it's not strange for a student to be fond and be grateful to his teacher. But al-Shafi himself, in return, acknowledged his student's excellence in his knowledge of the Sunnah by saying to him, "You are more knowledgeable in hadith and in the biography of hadith narrators than I. And if you hear from any authentic hadith, let me know whether it is related in Kufa, Basra, or Syria. I will refer to it if it proves to be authentic." And al-Shafi had such a high regard for Ibn Hanbal that he would not mention his name, but would refer to him as the reliable and trustworthy one among his companions. And these are just glimpses which clearly show the high standards of ethics and behavior practiced by the eminent scholars of early times. These high standards were not affected by differences in approach and methodologies, even though they had them. These righteous forebearers of ours were brought up into and guided by the teachings and exemplary patterns set by the noble prophet, and selfish motives and impulses did not get the better of them in their righteous pursuit of knowledge. Biographies and history books are replete with instances of scholarly interaction conducted in an intellectual, exacting but highly refined and gracious manner according to the best traditions of Islam. This is an object lesson for us today, fragmented and desperate as we are. We need to return to this level of consciousness and refined and gracious behavior which our noble ancestors have demonstrated for us. This must be done if we are indeed serious in striving to reconstruct the truly Islamic pattern of life. And admittedly, there were instances in which these lofty Islamic standards were not observed. But the responsibility for this failure lies with unthinking followers or recalcitrant individuals who became steeped in bigotry and fanaticism. And these individuals or groups failed to perceive the true scientific spirit, if you will, in scholarly interaction, which accounted for the differences amongst those jurists. Nor did they have any insight into the sublime norm of proper adab, which emanate from pure intentions, a genuine search for truth, and a desire to ascertain the purpose of the lawgiver. They were, it seems, the type of people about whom Al-Ghazali had said, the jurists have become seekers of favor and status after they were once sought for their knowledge and integrity. They were highly respected when they shunned the blandishments of those in political authority, but they have now become disgraced by succumbing to them. And the one who is sought for his knowledge and integrity is the one who is free and is a master of himself. He does not deviate from the truth. And the one who is a seeker of favor and status sells himself and is only concerned with pleasing his master. And unthinking followers and self-seeking individuals set differences of opinion into a totally negative mold. And differences of opinion among genuine scholars were, to begin with, a source of blessing which helped develop Islamic jurisprudence, helped to establish the relevance of Islam to changing circumstances, and safeguarding public welfare. And then to close, later differences of opinion became one of the most critical and dangerous factors contributing to disunity and internecine strife among the Muslims. And indeed, it became a scourge which dissipated much of the energies and potential of the Muslim Ummah. It caused people to become engrossed in matters which did not deserve the attention that was given to them. Alhamdulillah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from that and allow us to return back to this sort of quality of interaction that they had with one another, not just for the scholars, but also for the laymen and for our communities in general. Ameen. But with that, we come to a close for this chapter, chapter 8. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khairan for bearing with me and listening in. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all for staying tuned. And as a reminder, please join us for the after reading discussion that we'll have every single week. With that, we will go ahead and close. Allahumma subhanaka wa bihamdi ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.